All right, guys, before we get started, what I want you to do is go ahead and hit that like button, hit share, hit subscribe, hit follow, whatever works best on the platform that you're on. Everything that you do to engage with the podcast helps us spread the message and really helps reinforce us being the force of change within veterinary medicine, and we're extremely grateful if you're able to do that for us. So thank you very much. All right, let's get to the show. Oh, I just pushed the wrong button. I'm going to do that again. All right, take two. We almost cut our intro off there, but today on the PAWCast, we have Andrea Weinrick. Did I say your last name right, Andrea?
Yes.
Awesome. Fantastic. As an individual with a last name Glasscock, I can totally understand having my last name mispronounced. I always like to do that right. I invited you on here after just some basic Instagram engagements and all that sort of stuff. You and I actually had the opportunity to meet about a year and a half ago at the Michigan Veterinary Conference, as we were there as exhibitors and just trying to spread the idea of whatever the heck paw health is. That was one of the strangest sales experiences of my life. So we can maybe get into that. But when we met, I had this chance to just connect and learn a little bit about your story and kind of, what got you basically to the point of where you are today, and through, because you are a quote unquote second lifer, and your story was interesting enough for me to remember all of this time. Be like, what? We will definitely have to get into that on the podcast because that was actually before we started the podcast. And once that kind of started rolling and we started getting into the idea of bringing on guests, I was like, you know what? If she's willing, like at the very least, she will have some interesting insights into the vet school experience because of the unique nature of how she got there. So I guess to start off, Andrea, what I think would be a great place to kind of introduce yourself is essentially that. So if you had to give the elevator speech on you, how do you do that? And kind of a little bit about how you got to where you are at today.
Ooh, the elevator speech. Okay, well, basically, I'm, as you said, a second lifer. I took the scenic route to get to vet school. I had a whole other life and career plans before I got here. Started with wanting to go to vet school, having a bad experience with my first time in college out of high school, deciding to join the military, then plans changing again, starting a family, then plans changing again, and now here we are in vet school.
Yeah,
that's the abridged version.
Yeah, no, that's a really good synopsis, because it allows us kind of the opportunity to maybe just touch on some points along the way there. So first bit in college, tell me a little bit about that. It was right out of high school. Kind of, did you have a plan when you first started college, and then kind of what fell apart that pushed you or accelerated your path into the military?
Yeah, I started off wanting to, study animal science and go to vet school, like just about everybody that starts on the path of vet med.
Yep.
My cousin tells a story of when I was 6 years old, I used to introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm going to be a veterinarian." So, it's always been something that I wanted to do. And then I went to a high school where college was not really emphasized, and I was a big fish in a small pond, and then I came to MSU and became a little fish in a very big pond, and I was extremely overwhelmed. I didn't go to class regularly. I struggled with chemistry, and I thought, well, this is it. MSU politely asked me to leave after a semester. Yeah. And for anybody that's listening that's wondering, hey, can I go to vet school when I had a bad undergrad experience? I will tell you that my GPA after one semester was a 0.5. I'm not kidding. I'm not embellishing that. It's not something I'm proud of.
Right.
I turned that around eventually to get myself into vet school.
Yeah.
And it's not because I was not intelligent. I wasn't ready. And not everyone is ready for college, and that's okay. So after I left MSU, I sort of bounced around for about a year, and then I said I need some direction and ended up joining the military. And that really kind of propelled my entire life forward from there.
Okay. So yeah, I guess with that then, you did a semester in college and then you joined the military. What branch of the military did you join, and kind of what was the idea behind that? Because it's, I would say it's probably not the most frequent thing that people go from college into the military. It's typically like once you get out of that high school range, right? It's, well, I know that my path is at least for now going into the military, and I don't necessarily have that kind of that in-between zone. So tell me a little bit about that decision-making process and kind of why you chose that path at that time.
Well, like I said, I was kind of bouncing around, felt pretty lost, didn't really have a whole lot of direction in my life, needed some discipline.
Yep.
I come from a very long line of individuals who've served in the military, including both my parents.
Okay.
And so that just felt actually really natural to me to join the Army. I joined the Army Reserves so that I could still have that option to eventually return to college. I joined the military police. I wanted to actually drive a tank.
Nice.
But back in the 90s, they still had exclusions on things that women could and could not do in the military. And I was told I could not drive a tank because I was a woman. So that was sort of my first like eye-opening experience of, wait a minute, like I've lived in this bubble where, you know, I've been pretty privileged and seen, you know, how the world is, but now I'm getting this taste of, well, maybe it isn't what I thought it was this whole time.
Yeah.
And so I went away to basic training and what they call AIT, which is your specialization for whatever you're going to do. For me, it was military police.
Okay.
And then I came back and I asked MSU if I could come back, and they said yes. I was on probation. I had to turn my grades around, which I did. I also switched majors, which helped me because I was no longer studying science-related classes. I was studying criminal justice, which is not science-based whatsoever.
Right.
So then after about being back a year or so from, you know, basic and AIT, I met my husband, and then a few days after we got married, we got deployed.
All right. So yeah, I guess that's pretty crazy, number one. But yeah, so you guys met stateside as a part of being, you were both in the Army Reserves, and then get married, go through that whole process, and then you get deployed. Where were you deployed to?
We both deployed to Guantanamo Bay.
Okay.
So we actually were reclassed because that wasn't a military police position. It was a corrections position, which they're related but not the same. So we had to be retrained before we went there.
Now, with your criminal justice education, was that a part of that?
No, it was something completely different.
Okay.
When I switched gears, I thought that I would end up being a police officer at some point. I really enjoyed the nature of helping people, and then I married a police officer because in his civilian job, that's what my husband did, and we decided very quickly that 2 police officers in one family is not a good idea when you want to raise kids. It works for some people. It would not work for us.
I can only imagine. And that was over in the East Lansing area. Is that correct?
Ish, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because you had mentioned before that you came from eastern Wisconsin, so like I know that area well enough with being in the Wisconsin area. I was like, well, if she's talking about being in like the Appleton area, like being a cop over there is probably not the worst thing. I mean, times 2 is a lot. That's a lot of odd, you know, tough hours, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, that's pretty. That's an interesting story. But now, since you guys were married, were you intentionally deployed at the same time, the same place together? Was that kind of a part of that process?
It wasn't intentional, but we were in the same unit,
Oh, okay.
so that meant that we were deployed together.
Yeah.
At the time, we didn't have children, and even when you do have children, the military requires you to create a family care plan, meaning if you're in the same unit and you both get deployed, you have to have somebody to take care of your children. They don't say, well, sorry, one of you can stay back. Like, that's what you sign up for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thankfully, at the time, we didn't have children, so we both went together.
Okay. As an individual that works for a husband and wife duo, I have been able to see kind of some of the interesting, because just working with your spouse is hard, I think, in every setting. How was that being deployed together? Was it easier, more difficult? Like, how did that kind of go?
It was easier in the respect that we were together. So,
Yeah.
in our off time, we could spend that together.
Yep.
Especially being newlyweds.
Right. Right.
But in other aspects, it was very difficult, especially for my husband, because being a woman in a male-dominated industry, if you
Yeah.
want to call the Army an industry,
Yep.
and in an MOS like military police, where there is, again, predominantly males, on a deployment where all of the detainees are also males, it's very difficult for a spouse of a woman to see those interactions that can be sometimes negative and not react himself. He has to keep his own composure and keep his own military bearing. So that was a very trying time for him, and then also for me in many regards.
Right. Yeah, and that's so the only reason that I really ask is because that just to get an understanding of kind of the unique experience, especially knowing that you can the military is what it is. We'll just go with it's an industry just for the ease of having a word to go with it. But with that, it's absolutely male dominated. And what years were you at Guantanamo?
In 2002 to 2003.
Okay, so that was when it was expanding pretty significantly, and that was...
Yes, it was right after September 11th and right before the invasion in Iraq.
Yeah.
So we were actually in Guantanamo when the invasion of Iraq happened.
Yeah, and that was just being such a high-stress time, and that would have been, it's one thing to have to go through that quote-unquote by yourself, but to have that added element of my spouse is here, and now there's that extra bit. You can learn lessons in a more accelerated way when there's more ties to kind of go along with that. So, as we're kind of working through all of that too, you were now that would have been probably, what year was that in your overall military experience? Because you said you had about 8 years. Was that early?
Yeah, I joined in 2000.
Okay. Yep.
And so that was, 2 or 3 years in, but I was only 22 at the time,
Right.
so I was still very much a baby.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I am turning 30 in a couple months, and I think about myself at 22, and the idea of putting myself in that situation is that would have been a terrible idea. So I totally get where you're coming from there. And then you kind of work your way. So 2000 to 2008 was roughly military time. Is that about right then?
Correct.
Okay. And then when did you actually graduate from Michigan State with your Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice?
I graduated in 2005.
Okay.
So came back. Our first daughter was born in 2003.
Okay.
And I actually walked across the stage to get my bachelor's degree 7 months pregnant with my son.
Nice.
In 2005.
Yep. Awesome. And then any deployments between 03 and 08 at all?
No, the last deployment that I would have been eligible for, I was actually pregnant with our last child.
Okay.
And so when you're pregnant, they obviously don't send you for that reason.
Right.
And then, so what happens when in the reserves is often you have what's called a 6x2 contract. So it's 6 years of active service and then 2 years of inactive. So during that last 2 years, if there had been a deployment that they needed personnel for, I would have been or could have been called up for. I wasn't. And then my contract expired.
Okay. So yeah, then, that period in your life kind of ends. You're at that point, you're 3 kids deep, which I totally understand not re-signing that contract. So then I guess walk me through kind of, how much did you try out the criminal justice life, and walk me through kind of how you got to the point of choosing to apply to go to vet school at Michigan State.
Sure. So part of the reason I didn't renew my contract, and it was a long talk with my husband, because and when I joined, I wanted to do 20 years.
Okay. Yep.
Part of the reason that I didn't is I knew very quickly I wanted to be home with our children, and I didn't want them to have to live with somebody else, even temporarily, while I was deployed. Nor did I want to leave our children in a situation where they could be orphaned because my husband and I both deployed.
Right.
And that is a very real possibility that I think a lot of individuals don't understand or realize. And so it was a very big decision on our part. And that just segued naturally into me being a stay-at-home mom. We did some math of, me going to work, and that would essentially pay for daycare, and why would I pay somebody else to raise our kids when I could do it myself? And not that there's anything wrong with people who utilize daycare or do things differently. It just didn't work for what I wanted as a mother. And my husband has always been 100% supportive of, okay, whatever you want.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's actually the reason I'm in vet school. So
okay.
The plan was always that when our youngest got to kindergarten, I would figure out my career and go from there. So I started brainstorming, what can I do with a criminal justice degree? Probation, police officer, there are a lot of things that you can do. And my husband said, I just don't think you'll be happy with any of those.
Okay.
And I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do then. And he said, if you could go back to school to do anything right now, like disregard money, how much time, cost, all of that, what would you do? And I said, I'd go back and be a veterinarian. It's what I've always wanted to do. I've wanted to be that since I was little. And that's just like my whole life. Animals have been a part of it. Me rescuing animals, me being involved in all kinds of ways with animals. And he's like, well, then do it. And I laughed at him. Like, do you know how crazy that is?
Right.
We have 3 kids. Like, I'm not young anymore. Right. And he's like, yeah, but if it's your passion and that's what you want to do and it's your dream career, then why wouldn't you do that? So I made a deal with him that I would reapply to MSU, and if they let me in, then we would just take it one step at a time.
Okay.
And that's what we've done. Like, I applied and they're like, yeah, sure, come back. And I'm like, oh gosh, now it's real. But having a Bachelor of Arts, I didn't have any science classes. So I literally had to go back and do everything from scratch.
Yep.
So I've been in school since 2011.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I had to get essentially the equivalent of a bachelor's degree in science in order to apply to MSU.
Yep. Yeah, so they let you in on the undergrad side again, just be like, sure, you want to take some more classes? Have at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started there, and then because of where we were living at the time, which was about an hour from East Lansing, I ended up bouncing around from Saginaw Valley State University, and then I also took some classes at LCC because I talked to admissions at MSU, and they're like, well, we don't really care where you get the classes from. We just want you to have the classes. I was like, all right, let's do this. So I just took classes wherever I could take them.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's a very different. We'll go with different path, but I get it, right? It's like you just have to do what you have to do. If you got the goal out in front of you, I'm guessing since you and Bree Kraut are pretty good friends that you got to listen to her podcast. But that was one of the things with her path that I really appreciated. How it definitely was non-linear. And she got declined from getting into vet school a couple times, but just did whatever it is that she had to do to get to the point of actually being accepted, and just that resilience and just being able to take the hit and continue forward, which is actually kind of I would say it's a fair segue, maybe not a great one, but I put it on Instagram earlier today, and I apologize to everyone. Andrea is now a fourth year because the previous fourth years have now graduated. So congratulations on making it to fourth year.
Thank you.
I believe it was in like literally PAWCast episode 1. We made a reference to because we actually used the after action report, which I literally just pulled straight out of the Marine Handbook, and we like to utilize like military style references often. I don't actually have any family or myself that has ever served or anything like that, but I've also read every book by Jocko Willink, so like my brain just kind of started to think that way after reading enough of those words, and I listen to his podcast all the time, all that sort of stuff. But ever since PAWCast episode 1, I've had this idea in my head that veterinary school is kind of like boot camp, where it's like, because from the outsider looking in, it's like, well, excuse the gendered language, but you tear down the boy and you rebuild a man. And I think in that first episode, it's like, well, vet school forgot the rebuild part. They're just really good at just trying to tear people off of whatever ledge that they're on. And but that is absolutely like the most outsider view possible. I've never been to boot camp. I have never been to vet school, but from the stories and the people that we've been able to connect with, it's like, man, I really feel like there's some similarities here. Which is exactly why I was like, when you and I met, I was like, man, like that's the person that's really going to know. So that's really kind of my first question. You've been through pretty much all of it. Is it even close to the same thing?
In many ways, yes.
Okay.
And to your point of they forgot to rebuild part, you have to look for those individuals who do that.
Okay.
Those mentors definitely exist within vet school, but
Sure.
sometimes we often get so blindsided by all the other noise that's going on that we don't see them.
Yeah.
I actually made myself a little list here of things comparing vet school to military training / boot camp. The first one is they're both like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
So my first day in boot camp, and I don't know how much it's changed, so we're talking 2000 versus 2021. I don't know what it's like in 2021.
Yeah.
You literally are put on a cattle trailer. And when I say cattle trailer, I mean like the ones that we use for cattle in vet med.
Yep.
You're put on one of those with, 50 to 100 other soldiers, and then you come off and they just start yelling and screaming at you to do this, do that. And while they don't do that in vet school, there is a lot of information that's coming, 90 miles an hour at you, and you're trying to just absorb whatever you can.
Yeah. Yep. How is that? I'll call it a triage process because that's the world that we live in, right? It's like, we're actually, Memorial Day was probably a good example, just so you're kind of aware of like the caseload and stuff that we see. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and I'll include Tuesday because the Monday or the Tuesday after Memorial and holiday is like our two busiest days of the year. We saw it was like 315 patients in those 5 days. So a lot of stuff coming in, right? And we got a lot of people here, but there's only so many hands to go around. When you were now, I guess I'm curious how you were able to adjust to that in the vet school experience based on your boot camp experience. Is like when you're 20 years old and you just enlisted and they're just hammering this all at you. How did you kind of learn how to prioritize that stuff, and then did that translate once you got into vet school?
Yeah, I mean, you can't, when you're getting off that cattle carrier and people are yelling at you to pick up your bag and drop your bag and drink water and don't drink water and why is your face so red? So when I get really hot or like stressed, my face just gets red. It doesn't mean I'm about to pass out, but I got yelled at for it.
Right.
When you're having all of these things come at you, you just have to pick one and dedicate yourself to that. It may not always be the right one, and that's okay. And then you just pick up the next one once you've got the first one. So pick up the bag. Okay, I've picked up the bag. Now what? Drink the water. Okay, well, that means I have to set down the bag. Like it seems very simplistic, but when you have all of that noise from the outside coming in and you're trying to think on the fly, it does end up boiling down to becoming very task oriented and checking off those tasks as you go along.
Yep. And then kind of how with that task or being able to just kind of see the next step that's in front of you, how do you feel like that played out, especially with that early, even during that undergrad time, right? Because you went from like an initial undergraduate experience where the sciences kicked your ass so hard that it was like, well, I'm clearly not made for this, to the point of going through a BA and not really having, the hard sciences, if you will, and then needing to acquire all of that. Did that experience help you kind of be able to just roll with it and just see the next step rather than worrying about how far ahead you have to go?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of thinking down the road of, oh my gosh, I have to take all of these prerequisites, or oh my gosh, vet school is 4 years long, it became a process of, okay, what is the class I'm in right now? What do I need to accomplish so I can get to the next step and the next step after that? And that's really how I've gotten through this process, is just taking it one step at a time. There's that adage, or if you will, of how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat it one bite at a time. And that's literally how I've gotten through this process.
Yeah. I guess, what were your other notes that were kind of your similarities or differences that you got?
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Okay.
And everybody probably knows this, but in the military, you sink or swim together as a group.
Okay.
And there was one time where one of the people in my bunk area decided to use floor stripper instead of, so we had to buff the floors every night.
Yeah.
And they used floor stripper instead of the stuff that you put on to make it nice and shiny. Well, that created these big streaks everywhere, and no one wanted to get in trouble. So we all collectively got up, took shifts, stripping the entire floor and then reglossing it all night. It was terrible. And that person ended up paying us back by doing night watch for several weeks in a row.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where you like, at the time you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. Why are we so angry about this? And then you move on and you learn how to incorporate those. Okay, well, this, embrace the suck and we'll deal with it, and we move on together, and it's done, and we fixed it, and it's over.
How did you guys learn that as a group? Did everyone kind of walk into that experience kind of expecting the fact that, like, I'm going to be tied at the hip to, how big was a unit?
It really depends. I think there were like 20 females in my platoon.
Yeah. And
everybody is assigned a battle buddy, and that person is your person that's tied to the hip. So you hope for a great one.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not so great. So when they get in trouble, you get in trouble. And it teaches you how to basically police your peers. And so, you check over their uniform before you're being, judged on those things, or before you go and do exercises, you make sure you run through things. It teaches you how to look past the individual and towards the team. And that's really something that I think is very valuable in veterinary medicine. Is it's not just about you. You may be the doctor, but you have a team of nurses and professional staff that runs your office, or if wherever you're at, you're not the only person that's there. And so that's one thing that I do think is very valuable for me going forward, is that can be a struggle. I know it was for me when I was in my 20s, thinking past myself.
Yeah, that's actually, so if you're not familiar with kind of the way that we structured PAW, it is, so we have a toppled hierarchy. Traditionally in your veterinary practices, it goes pretty much straight down from doctor to vet nurse or veterinary technician to unlicensed medical staff to reception staff. And those are your 4 primary roles. And there are other things that happen in a vet practice. However, for us, it's all about each one of those roles has a unique skill set, a unique talent base, and a unique insight into the patient care process. And yes, even though to acquire a DVM title and all the credentials and stuff that go with that, it takes time and effort and money, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't mean that they have the same insight that a technician or a nurse is going to have. It doesn't mean that, for me, I have zero medical or veterinary experience. I don't know anything about actually treating animals. However, from the front end, I can see the caregiver experience. I can understand and maybe empathize with them a little bit more, because all of these medical people are saying words I don't understand. Well, maybe we got to roll it back. And it's not to say that that ignorance is a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. So the more that you can value the insights of your team, the more that you can appreciate the way in which they look at the world, I think the easier it is to have a successful practice. And I would venture to guess that would also make it easier to have a successful team within a military style setting, where it's like, you're going to see the world this way and I see it this way. And we are going to disagree. There's going to be conflict in this setting, regardless of how much we try to avoid it or make it not happen. So the more that I can look at you and say, hey, you provide value at your position, and I want to collaborate with you based on that value, I think the easier it is to create success within missions and all that sort of stuff. But I didn't live it. Am I off my rocker?
No, I don't think so. And I also think that there's this thing in the military where you respect the rank and you don't always have to respect the person. You're gonna disagree, like you said. Yep. You're not always gonna be on the same page, and it's sort of like playing this personality Jenga where, even in vet school, they may tell you something that you don't like, or they may grade you in a way that you perceive as unfair, but the bottom line is they're the one that's grading you. Yeah. They're the one who's telling you what to do, and you can call it an injustice and get really upset about it, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And so you respect the fact that they're in charge and do what you can and control what you can, and then you move on.
I guess that kind of leads me to my next question is, as you've rolled through the didactic and now you're getting in, you just had your first surgical rotation, right? And now this is break rotation, and then you're pretty much just nonstop here for the next bit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, kind of going with that, I'm assuming that there were some educators on the didactic side that were maybe a little bit easier to collaborate with, and some that were maybe a little bit more difficult. Was that basically just a direct comparison that you kind of saw, where it's like, yep, this person isn't necessarily the best mentor in the world, but you got to respect the rank regardless of the person? That sounds like it's pretty much just a direct parallel.
Yeah, it is. And I like to look at it as, okay, well, I don't particularly care for this person or the way that they're grading or even their teaching style, but what can I take from it? Yep. Because everybody has something valuable to give. Sometimes you just have to look for that a little bit harder than you do with other people. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like your path, because that was my next curiosity, kind of across everything, is kind of what advantages or disadvantages that you've been able to realize in your educational experience through vet school is, like, you've had more life experience. You've likely had significantly more military experience than almost all of your classmates. Is that something that you feel like you have a distinct advantage on, is just being able to roll with that? Because, like, the thing that we see from students often is they are highly competent, but confidence is pretty limited. And typically that confidence has been shook by somebody else. Basically, like they felt like they knew what they were doing, and then just get beat down and beat down and beat down, and they don't necessarily know what to do with that intense level of feedback. Do you feel, you can only speak for your own story, obviously, but you also probably have, I'm sorry, what was the term, buddy? What was
battle buddy?
Battle buddy, which I'm assuming has got to be Bree, right?
I actually have two.
Okay.
Bree is one,
Yep.
and we bonded over our love of hockey.
Yep.
And another one is Margaret, who we bonded over our shared military service because she
Okay.
was also in the military.
Awesome. So with that, like just knowing, your friends the way that you do you feel like your experience has kind of given you a leg up in essentially managing the emotional process of kind of maintaining that confidence while you're increasing your competence?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint advantages versus disadvantages because I can look at it both ways. For example, just having a family is for me sometimes an advantage because it keeps me grounded. Like they're my why, they're the reason that I'm doing this. They're my cheerleaders when I come home and I'm like, that's it, I'm done. Vet school's too hard. I don't want to do this anymore. And they're like, no, you're really smart. You can do this. And like, they already see me as the doctor I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge advantage that I have. But on the other side, it takes time away from studying. It takes time away from experiences. My family's been great about, I've done an out-of-state externship already. I've been on boards of, like VBMA and things like that. So they've been very supportive of me wanting to have as much of the vet school experience as I can, but it's still a disadvantage in some ways because it's not the same as if I had gone through in my 20s.
Right. Yeah, no, that's, actually, I just did a podcast the other day with Caroline and Molly. Haven't put it up. We pre-recorded it because I really had no idea where it was going to go, but talked actually a lot about, because they're very different people from like a personality perspective, and what we really highlighted in that is like your greatest asset can also be your greatest weakness. And I think that's understanding that dichotomy of like, you really have to be able to find that balance and have people around you that can also appreciate that balance, which it sounds like you have been blessed with, which kudos to your family and everybody, because I can't imagine that it's been easy necessarily, but it's been worthwhile, which I think is an important distinction to make, because we talk a lot around here about shared purpose and well-being, and for us, at least from a work perspective, it's all serve the patient, right? Like, I don't necessarily care who you are, where you came from, kind of where you're headed. When you're here, it's all about serve the patient, and we unite behind one front, and the families will do that in their own ways with their own individual purposes and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know where I was going with that, so I'm going to pause that thought. Sometimes that happens. You start a sentence, you don't know where it's going to go, and it leads nowhere.
That's the story of my life.
So with that, I mean, other stuff. If you made me a list, I'm not going to let that list go by.
Well, I guess vet school has, in some ways, these impossible standards and a lot of mental stress. And going through my military experience was definitely something that prepared me for going to vet school. Yeah. There are days where sometimes I feel like maybe I'm the crazy one because my classmates are running around like palpably stressed at whatever the situation is, whether it's the class or whatever, and I'm not. And so then I'm looking at myself saying, well, am I the crazy one? Like, not that they're crazy, but why am I not stressed and they are? And I think it's just that experience of being through the military, raising children. You're a dad, you'll find out pretty soon if you don't know already, when something freaks you out, you can't let everyone know that it freaks you out, because that just makes your kid freak out more. So you get really good at compartmentalizing and like putting things in boxes and dealing with it and looking like everything's great on the outside, but on the inside you're that dog whose like face is melting off.
I guess with that, and having the colleagues that you do in vet school, do you find yourself either putting yourself or having other people putting you in a more mentor or leader type position, or has that kind of assigned you a role in the groups that you get the opportunity to work with in vet school?
Sometimes. I've made some friends who on more than one occasion have referred to me as mom. Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah. Yep.
a lot of my classmates are closer to my oldest daughter's age than to my own age, and it doesn't bother me one bit. I've had classmates ask me about finances and how to do budgets, and I've had incoming classmates who are also parents themselves looking to me for mentorship because I've been through this, and I do share my story on Instagram about, you can go to school and have a family and essentially have it all without going crazy, losing your family. I had a veterinary mentor one time tell me that if you make it through vet school, you'll never make it with your family intact. They'll end up hating you because you spend so much time in vet school. And I just thought that was really poor advice to give somebody who wants to join veterinary medicine. And I've found the opposite. It's not always easy, and there are bumps along the road. But one thing we did do with our kids when we started this journey is we talked about, okay, these are the expectations that we have of you, and these are the ways things are going to change. Mom is in charge of all of these things, but now dad's going to take some of those over. And because you're getting older, you're going to take some of them over. And sometimes it's going to be great, and sometimes it's not going to be great, but we're all in this together. And we made sure that everybody was on board with me going back to school and pursuing my dream. And at no point have my kids ever said, please stop. I want you to stop. I'm done with you being away or missing events or anything like that. When I'm the one feeling guilty about, well, I'm sorry I didn't, make it to your hockey game or your recital or whatever, they're like, no, it's okay. It's fine. You've got vet school. We understand.
Right. So I guess you kind of answered it, but pretty smooth transition. Because you did the due diligence to say, okay, if we are going to do this, then this is what we have to do before it even starts. Because if we don't do that, it's likely you're likely to realize the preconceived notion of it falling apart or whatever the mentor that you had said. I guess was that something where because that's not something most people do if you were not aware. Is that pre-planning of here's, if you think about even just the basics of household chores, to go from stay-at-home mom to, okay, yep, mom has a long list, and now that list has got to be 1/3 of what it is, and now you guys got to help pick up the slack, and that's a part of the deal. I guess, was that a pretty smooth transition? It kind of sounds like it was.
For the most part, it's been rocky. They're kids. I'm asking them to do a lot of things that they have never done before.
Right.
But my husband and I also look at it as we are preparing them because, you and I talked before it started, my oldest just graduated high school. She's going off to Purdue in the fall and going to have to do all these things like clean her own laundry and, take care of herself as a human being. So instead of me looking at it as, oh my gosh, I'm putting all this responsibility on them, it's more of us looking at it as, well, we're just preparing them for the next stage of their lives.
Right. No, that's awesome, because I think that is something that a lot of parents, and I actually catch myself doing it. I only have a 2-year-old, so I do have to take on a lot of his responsibilities. He cannot operate the washing machine, but just having my friends have older kids and all that sort of stuff, and it's such a weird dynamic of I want to do all of this for you, but also if I do, you're not going to learn anything. So it's a weird kind of balance, and I guess it leads me to a question of, because here's just a thought that I have, and I guess I'm curious what your insights are, and this isn't on the list because sometimes you just got to have a thought, is
oh, you're going rogue.
Yes, going rogue is being able to balance these variables of, you talk about compartmentalizing, and sometimes you have to be super stoic, and sometimes you have to be yourself. You have to be able to let it out, because if you're super stoic, you just come off as distant and cold. But if you're super overly emotional, you come off as frantic and unapproachable, right? There's a balance there. There's a lot of different things, from a parenting perspective. You have to give your kids responsibilities, but you also have to not let everything fall apart. There's a lot of dichotomies in life, and I think we always get them wrong. No matter how hard we try, you're just going to miss sometimes. if not all the time. I miss frequently. I'm really, really good at making mistakes because I'm always just somewhere a little bit in the middle, but on the wrong side. I tend not to go one way or the other. But my question is, now, do you agree that you kind of got to find that balance? And do you feel like the experiences that you have had have made you better at balancing them, especially as compared to your colleagues that you are surrounded by at vet school?
I would say yes. My first semester here at MSU, I got probably the best piece of advice going through vet school, and I think about it all the time. Dr. Stephen Carey, I don't know if you know who he is. He's an excellent mentor. He went through vet school with kids as well. They were much younger than mine are. But he said that his wife told him when he was in vet school, you have to figure out what the bare minimum is for you and your family and never go below that.
Okay.
And that's literally how I judge everything that I do. So me, I'm too old to stay up until 2 a.m. studying for whatever exam. If I don't know it by the time I'm ready to go to bed at 10 p.m., then I don't know it. And I'm not going to get it in the next, 4 hours of staying up late and being exhausted and then not recalling it the next day. I could do that in my 20s. I can't do that now. But that's those things, sometimes missing a class because my kid has a tournament, or sometimes missing a tournament because I have some big vet school event going on. Whatever that bare minimum is for me and my family to make sure that we are all on the same page, that everybody is relatively happy with mom still being in vet school.
Right.
That's what I shoot for. Yeah. And sometimes I'm going to drop something and, make the wrong choice and somebody's going to be upset. But as long as I'm not always doing that, it's okay.
Yeah. To go along with that, one of the things that we implemented here at PAW and I attempt to do in my personal life, I am by no means perfect at it, is really being diligent about going through the process of forgiveness. Is that something that your family prioritized at all, or is that something that you guys kind of practice? Or because you're going to make mistakes, is it implicit in the way you guys communicate? Anything like that?
I think it might just be implicit in the way that we communicate. My husband and I established some really strong communication skills between the two of us very early on in our marriage. Right. And we just transitioned that into how we've raised our children, that, whatever is happening, whatever, bad, good, bad, or indifferent inside the family dynamics, we always talk about it. It's not okay to just shut yourself off and be angry about it. You have to at least let it out so that, people know where you stand. And that's how we do everything, including vet school. When I say, okay, I've got this big thing coming up right now, I have a poster on the outside of my office room door that says quiet, recording in progress. And for the most part, the dog can't read, so she's occasionally been barking, but for the most part, the kids know, okay, mom's in here, she's doing something that's important to her, we're going to keep it down, keep the noise level down. Just that communication, and I think that works outside of the family dynamic too, whether you're in a veterinary practice or the military or wherever you're at in your life, as long as you're communicating with people, then you know what level everyone is at, and then you can find the solution if a solution needs to be had. Yeah,
absolutely. To go along with that, because you kind of alluded to, that works in a veterinary practice. I'm curious what your plan is in terms of post-graduation. Do you have a goal? Do you have a 5-year plan post-grad? We had Bree Demeline on here a few weeks ago, and she's got it all laid out for the first 5, and then we're like, well, if you come work here for a year, your entire life is going to change. So, at least understand that you can have the goal, but the plan's going to be in sand a little bit. But yeah, for yourself, do you have a specific kind of, at least hope, maybe not necessarily a plan, but where you want your professional career to go?
I don't have a plan per se. I haven't written anything off the table just because there's so many experiences I haven't had. I know mostly I'm not a large animal person, but I still haven't written it off because I haven't had that rotation yet. I am very much attracted to emergency medicine, but also in a disaster response. In my brain, things that make me very excited are a natural disaster happening and then me going to help with veterinary care of animals during that.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things make me excited. I also really like infectious disease, hence the reason that I'm also getting an MPH at the same time as my DVM.
Yep.
That may be a little crazy, but...
Dr. Katie did it. So her last couple years of vet school, she got her MPH actually through University of Minnesota too. So she was in East Lansing and got her MPH from U of M. So not only put the excessive workload, but also a significant distance. So it is possible. And I think there's a reason, I think it's, you can do it. So yeah, I guess you're open to new ideas and all those sort, letting kind of life put you in a direction. Does that kind of sound about right?
Yeah, I'm not really interested at this stage in my life because I am older. I'm not really interested in owning my own practice.
Okay.
I know that's very appealing for a lot of new veterinarians, and more power to them. Yeah. That's not something that I'm interested in. I want to work somewhere that I have great mentorship, that I have great teamwork. I get along with my colleagues well, and we practice high quality medicine. So wherever that leads me, that's where I want to be. Yeah,
I think too, the cool part about that is one thing that happened really, really early on at Paw Health was, Carlo and Katie bought the practice 2015, put about a year in. It was a little bit less than a year. And then Annie, who is our senior accountability officer, and she's a CVT, she joined the team. So she had worked for the clinic that was purchased prior to purchase and knew them, and then ended up working at another practice for a while. And then through a little bit of recruiting effort, ended up here at Paw, and she's been exactly that. In it, not necessarily focused on ownership, to my knowledge. I could be out of the loop on something like that, whatever. But she's been that quote unquote ideal team player. Whatever it is that we got to do, whatever it is that we got to get done, we're going to get it done, and we're going to do so in a way that's going to encourage a quality culture. We're going to work together as a team. We're going to collaborate effectively. We're going to have conflict, and we're going to handle it in an appropriate way. And she's been absolutely invaluable to the entire process. I think Carlo might be sitting behind the wall here behind me at this point, but if I brought him in here, or Katie, it'd be the person that kind of really let this run was Annie. So there's a lot of value in being that person that's I don't necessarily need the quote unquote financial stake in this, because with that, you lose flexibility on the family side and all that. And but there's so much value to be distributed, both in wisdom, expertise, but also just a willingness to say yes and just collaborating with people. Is that something with your, when you were younger, did you have high hopes within your military experience to get that higher level leadership position, to kind of move up the ranks, or were you okay with kind of finding your place and fulfilling it well, or is that something that has transitioned where you've been a little bit more okay with not necessarily being the head honcho as you've kind of grown and gained experience and grown your family as well? I guess, how has that kind of gone for you?
I think when I was younger, I was probably more interested in being the head honcho.
Yeah.
Maybe not the top dog, but right. I definitely was interested in not being the bottom of the barrel either.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think now that I've had some life experience, I've realized that you can be just as effective as somebody further down the totem pole as the very top of the totem pole. You don't have to hold that leadership position. And in fact, a lot of the most influential veterinarians I know don't hold that top leadership position. Yeah. They're somewhere in the middle, and they're okay with that, but they can influence in both directions, and they're comfortable with where they are and how they affect change in both, upwards and downwardly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess with that, and kind of going into that, we're back to the list of questions that I sent you beforehand. So you've lived a lot more life than those that are around you, and when you get into veterinary practice, you'll have the very unique set of experiences and insights and all of that. What is something that is maybe been a little bit more consistent in like wisdom or advice that you have either sought out to share with those that are around you or have had to share by necessity, because it's like, you talk about how, when you're going through a tough, what you guys were essentially doing, the body systems, right? If you're in a tough body system and everyone's losing their mind and you're the one that's calm, was there an insight that I was like, wow, this scenario really is dictating that I provide this sort of wisdom, or maybe just a high five, I don't really know. Anything from that you've been consistently kind of putting out into the world that you've been drawing from your life experiences?
I think I just go back to like my sense of purpose and why are you here?
Yep.
And then also perspective. My husband and I have this saying of, is this going to matter in 10 years? Because in the moment, something could be like the biggest, worst thing on the planet. But when you try and put that perspective out 10 years, is this actually going to matter, or does it just matter right now? Because if it just matters right now, sure, you can be upset about it, but do you need to be as upset as you are? Do you need to like make your whole entire world implode because of it? Or can you just deal with it and then move on? And I think those kinds of things really help me in my own personal life going through vet school. Like we talked about earlier, looking at a situation like, why is everybody so upset? I think I've just internalized that because I use it so much. Is this going to matter in 10 years? Well, yes, knowing all the things in this body system is important for my veterinary career. But if you talk to enough veterinary students and veterinarians who've graduated from vet school, they'll tell you you don't know everything and you forget a lot of those things. So it really doesn't matter in 10 years in some ways, because you can go back and look it up. You can refresh your memory, take some CE, whatever it is, to relearn that information.
Yeah, that's actually something that we kind of preach around here too, is the concept or the phrase that gets kicked around so much is day one ready, right? But I think the problem with that phrase, I don't think it's an inherently flawed phrase, but we forgot to define it. Like it's a great headline, but what is the sub-headline? What is the guts that goes behind that? Because when left to its own devices, what I think a lot, because of how educationally strenuous vet school is, and you're being fed everything out of that fire hose, what I think that phrase is being construed as is, I have to be able to consume all of this and hold it down and keep it in, even though it is physically and mentally impossible. And for us, all we are looking for is growth mindset, being able to say, yes, I don't know everything, but I'm going to learn it as it comes forward. Like I acknowledge the fact that I'm going to forget some stuff. I acknowledge that I am human, and it's called veterinary practice for a reason, right? And it's to be able to kind of, I guess maybe I'll throw that back at you. How do you define day one ready?
Well, I think the way that the college wants you to think about it is that you know all the things and you're ready to just hit the road running. For me, it's having all the tools that I need in my toolbox to start as a veterinarian. I may not remember how to use those tools, but they're there somewhere. And as long as I can figure out which one I need and how to apply it eventually, to me, that's day one ready. And like you said, being that growth mindset and open to, okay, I don't know everything, but I'm going to learn. I really think in some ways how the veterinary medicine has evolved from a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not mentorship, but where you used to go out and you would follow somebody along for however many years, and then
an apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. An apprenticeship where you learned all those things on the job and they taught you as you went along. I feel like in some ways veterinary medicine is now at a disservice because we don't have that apprenticeship. And that's why so many students end up going on to do internships, because that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's, I from understanding that externship process and kind of that first, because we hired, they just got through year one of actual full-time employment, was 3 docs from MSU. So Dr. Burris, Dr. Fenton, and Dr. Gatta. that first year, there's a lot of hands-on, like, especially in our setting, because everything comes in. It's, we are that last line of, if it's sick, it's coming here. And so, there's pros and cons to that, because they got to learn a ton in a very, very short amount of time, but also they had to be taught a ton in a very, very short amount of time. And it's like, they walked in with this skill set and they didn't realize what they had. We saw it. And it's like, it's one of those things where you can literally watch somebody know the right answer and they just can't get it out of their mouth. And it's like, you're saying all of the right things. Just highlight the piece of paper and say that this is the right thing to do. And I think that's a part of that misconstruction of that day one ready concept, is it's like, well, I don't actually know 100% of all of the things that could potentially go wrong or right if we do this Flex 4 and send it home with doxycycline. Like, I don't know, because I came from Michigan, and apparently now there's finally ticks in Michigan, which I thought was a very, very weird news development. But like, all of that's, and you can see, and the cool part about it was, for them, there was kind of this tipping point of confidence, and it went from, I'm not necessarily afraid, but I'm skeptical of myself, to like, no, this is what we're going to do, and getting it wasn't a competence problem, it was a confidence issue. And once that flipped, it's like, well, now they're just doing all the stuff because they just know that they can. So I'm curious. I will pencil in the concept of having you on the podcast after about the first 6 months of being employed as a veterinarian, because I'm so curious. And I hope that you go to a practice where you can also work alongside somebody that is graduated same time, right? So you can kind of run parallel, but is, basically is kind of that more traditional path, because I think that would be something that would be really, really beneficial to both of you, to be, to have the insights from each other. And it's just vastly different life experiences. I don't know if that's a part of, your hopes or goals or anything like that, but I think at the very least it would be interesting. But yeah, it's one of, I see this as one of those things is I lose my train of thought sometimes. So, I guess to go along, or to kind of circle back to the original question, any other insights, and actually maybe more, for your classmates, colleagues, anything like that you have the platform, right? I'm going to put this on the internet again here in a little bit. What would, if you could tell them anything, kind of what would it be?
Oh, geez, there's
so many question.
That's a heavy question. I mean, so many of my classmates are young, and, like, I feel like half of them are just getting married and maybe starting families and things like that. I'm living proof that it's never too late to do anything. Mm-hmm. If you get into veterinary medicine and you're like, I wanted to be this large animal vet, and now I've changed my mind and I want to do small animal, but I don't know if I can because I don't remember that, just do it. Like, It's okay. If you want to go back and get an MPH later, or a PhD, or whatever you want to do, just do it. If I can do this at 41 with 3 kids and a husband at home, like, you can do it. Anyone can do it.
I love it. That's all. That was the clickbait right there. No, I'm just, so I guess because we are actually kind of hitting the hour point, and I do try to typically keep these to about that length. One of the things that I do like to do with folks that come on is see if you have any questions for us as well, whether or not I answer them right now, or when I am able to kind of pin down Carlo and answer that question from his perspective, or Caroline or Dr. Katie, and some of the other resources that I'm working on building right now. We actually, you're the first person to know outside of the organization, Veterinary Mental Health. If you don't follow them on Instagram, I recommend that you do. And one of their doctors, it will be on the podcast next Tuesday. So nice. Building that network, because there's a lot of problems that can be solved, and we have a lot of opportunity in that. But with that, giving you at least the opportunity, what questions do you have that you would want to throw at any of those people?
Oh, I wasn't prepared to.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I like to throw curveballs out there.
I don't, you know, even in interviews, I really find that what questions do you have for me is like
Yeah.
the hardest one, because that's when my brain's like, there's nothing in here.
Right. And then like 30 minutes later after you walk
Yeah.
out the door, it's like, I should have asked that question.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, it's all good. It's just sometimes, you got them that they come up. So I was just kind of curious more than anything.
I'm sure I will have tons as soon as you hit end call.
And that's okay. That's why the internet exists, right? Like the fact that I can put a computer screen in front of me and we can do this from, over the internet, I'm grateful for. As much as COVID has made things hard on a lot of things, and there's obviously been the significant negatives to it, the fact that it has shrunk the world so significantly, I think is really, really cool and provides even more opportunity to connect with people, whether it's obviously in this platform, but even just professionally. Like the idea of having a digital mentor 5 years ago, I don't think really existed. Now it's commonplace. So I guess that's another question that I have for you. Do you have like a mentor that you kind of have quote unquote lined up to help you out post graduation?
I actually have one so Dr. Crocker, I'm sure you know who she is through Instagram. She came and spoke virtually through VBMA.
Yep.
And I mentioned that I was going through vet school as a mom, and she sent me a message, said, hey, keep in touch with me. I want to help you with your journey. And that's where my out-of-state externship ended up being, is I got to go down and meet her in person, and I did 2 weeks in Texas with her. And,
Nice.
she checks in on me to make sure I'm doing good. And that's, the power of the internet made that happen.
Right. Yeah, that's with being with the fact that we've wanted to connect so closely with so many students, but we're in central Wisconsin. It's like, there used to be a lot of airplane rides, but now it's, we did, I think this last year we did 3 VBMA talks and a couple of things through the house system, all that sort of stuff. And actually our involvement in the house system is going to be increasing pretty substantially here this next year. So going to be all sorts of good stuff. But yeah, I guess with that, I will leave the floor to you if you have any final thoughts or feelings or ideas or suggestions, anything like that.
This was really great. I was pretty nervous when we first started, but you made it pretty not nerve-wracking for me, so thanks.
Yeah, I can completely understand how being live on the internet is a very stressful thing. I don't know. We have a Julie Stadelman. I don't know if I said that.
That's my mom.
She says she said, yay, that's my girl. So she's on and watching. So hi, Mom. Thank you very much for joining. I know it was kind of off the cuff, and I was supposed to have other people even in the room with me, and we trudged our way through that. But honestly, thanks for sharing your story, because you've heard it from other people where it's like you really have an interesting and insightful and cool process or journey, and you look at the world differently than a lot of other people do. And not necessarily that everyone has to look at the world the way that you do, but they can glean some insight. They can see somebody who has gone through a lot of stuff. I mean, you literally survived Guantanamo Bay in 2002 and 2003, which was that's a stressful experience. We'll just keep it that simple.
Yep.
And you had a marriage survive that as well. So I knew that there was something that I'm glad that we are now able to circle back on. And don't be afraid to share it further. The fact that you've continued to share it on social media, I think, is really helpful to a lot of people. I'm sure that you've been thanked a number of times, but I will thank you as well, because I'm not in that world, and I can understand the value that you're able to provide to people that are going through a similar process as you, because as much as it does probably suck sometimes to be the eldest, classmate in the room, there's a lot of wisdom to be had in that as well. So thanks for not necessarily being shy with that. And I would say the more that you can share, I don't know if you were a verbal thinker, but I certainly am. And I found that the more that I can talk about stuff, the more that it's easier for me to process as well. So I guess with that, we can kind of wrap this up unless you got anything else.
No, I mean, anybody that's watching this, if they are struggling, like I said earlier, with should I go back to school? Can I do this? Feel free to reach out. I talk to random strangers who are considering going to vet school, and they're like, I have kids, and watching your journey really made me feel like I could do it. In fact, somebody that's coming into MSU in the fall actually contacted me last year asking me questions about the process and said they'd been following my journey. So that's what I'm here for. My dad tells me that I have a unique story and I need to put it out in the world so that people can learn from it, and I'm happy to answer anybody's questions. So
Awesome.
Feel free to look for me on Instagram.
Yeah, and I will go ahead. I'll put a hot link in the description with everything as well, so they can be able to get quick access in there. And yeah, if everyone just feel free to shoot Andrea a message if you got any questions. But yeah, with that, I will go ahead and take us out, Andrea. Thanks again very much for your time and your story. And again, I got it written in pencil that 6 to 9 months into your first job, we're gonna get you back on here, and we're gonna see what it's all about. Okay.
Absolutely. Love to come back.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.